Three bows to the Buddha. First bow. Second bow. Third bow. Bow to teacher.
Good morning, everyone. It's so nice to see you all again. Um, Let me just share the screen. Oh, hang on. Okay. So we're past the halfway mark. Let me just. So we've passed the halfway mark, and we've got another 2 lessons to go, including today's lesson. So just a quick recap of what I've been going through. So remember, we're going through the material in chapter 3 of The Way to Buddhahood. And so far, we're still at part 1, stage 1. And stage 1 is about right views. So Venerable Yin-Shun has grouped right views into 4 categories. And the first category of right view has to do with what is wholesome and what is unwholesome. So we need to be able to understand that in our everyday lives, in our mental activities, our physical actions, our speech. We do have elements that are wholesome and unwholesome. So we need to reflect on that and apply diligence in the Buddhist sense. Diligence means to be actively engaged in ceasing unwholesome deeds and carrying out wholesome deeds. So that's the first view we need to develop in ourselves and have a strong conviction. The second view is about karma and its results. So this is a very heavy going topic, and it's also one that a lot of people are very interested in, but most people seem to have a very simple view of karma until you start to actually research a bit more and study a bit more karma in the Buddhist sense. You'll actually start to see it's really complex. And you can't say it's a tit for tat or an eye for eye type of relationship. But that's the second view we need to establish in ourselves as a Buddhist practitioner. Now, the third view is about the existence of past and future lives. So for most people who are Buddhist, we tend to accept this as a given. But when you start to reflect on the different views people have around the world and from other worldly beliefs, you'll start to actually realize some people only believe that there is this life. There's no past and future. And some believe there's this life and there's a future life that is eternal. So they neglect past lives. But in the Buddhist sense, we need to establish the conviction that we have past lives, and that past begins at what we call time without beginning. So there is no original starting point for those who are hell-bent on trying to find the starting line. Now, the fourth is what we're going to begin looking at today, is the view that there are ordinary people and sages. So this is the fourth category of right view. And here the verse says, being born and dying is an endless cycle. Enlightened sages are liberated from this cycle. The difference between people and sages, unliberated and liberated, one should believe in this without any doubts whatsoever. So It's commendable when someone can establish the prior three aspects of right views concerning what is wholesome and unwholesome, concerning karma and its results, and have conviction in the existence of past and future lives. Nonetheless, if they do not believe in the state of liberation attained by the sages, then actually this human life has little purpose. Here, when we mention the word sage, it's not just an ordinary worldly hero. The word sage in Buddhism implies attaining wisdom or prajna, and it's with this wisdom or prajna that we can gain partial or full enlightenment. Now, sages are people who have attained enlightenment through their own spiritual cultivation, and so they have been able to liberate themselves from the endless cycle of being born and then dying and born again. And since time without beginning, all sentient beings, including ourselves, have been cycling endlessly within the 5 realms, going from one life to the next. And at times we progress to the higher realms and enjoy a fairly good life. But at other times we have regressed to the lower realms and endured much suffering. So when we look at this type of existence as a whole, we need to realize that we're actually stuck in a bit of a sad situation. But human life is certainly not without any hope at all. So if we have confidence in the existence and the possibility of attaining the state of liberation and freedom, then we will be able to move in that direction. So this is why we also have to have the right view that there are ordinary beings and enlightened sages. And importantly, we have to have conviction in ourselves that we can also become a sage. So what determines if one is a sage or not? So one has to accomplish undefiled, pure wisdom with which they realize the nature of all dharmas, or they realize emptiness. Now, this means a sage can penetrate the truth of all phenomena, and this is what we must accomplish if we want to become a sage. So please don't get mixed up with enlightened sages and worldly saints and heroes. Don't mix them up to think that they're the same. Among the sages, there are also different levels, and this reflects the various degrees of awakening that a sage has attained. So an obvious example is the 4 fruitions of an arahat. So for someone who has attained the first fruition, they have partial awakening, but compared to the 4th fruition of an arahat, they still have some aspects that they haven't fully purified. So even though the first fruition is already, people of that level have already entered the realm of the sages, there are different levels of sages depending on how much they have awakened. So the fundamental difference between ordinary people and a sage is the accomplishment of pure wisdom and having realized the truth. So some people may ask, or people may ask you, what is liberation? Now, in Buddhism, liberation embodies the meaning of removing something and being free from something. So sentient beings, as I mentioned, we're stuck in the cycle of life and death, and we have no freedom from suffering. A sage, on the other hand, who has attained pure wisdom, can sever the fundamental defilement that binds them to cyclic existence. So this is what is removed, and freedom from suffering is what they gain. So in this way, a sage has gained liberation from life and death, and they also attain true freedom and peace. Now, in terms of karmic results, an ordinary person and a sage are pretty much the same. And what this means is, while we're all still alive, an ordinary person and a sage, we still have this physical body and consciousness. So this is karmic results. However, for ordinary people that have not overcome their ignorance, their behaviors are still guided by their ignorance and delusions, and therefore they remain caught in cyclic existence. In contrast, a sage has attained pure wisdom through their spiritual cultivation, and so they have prajna to guide their actions, speech, and thoughts. And consequently, they can be liberated from the shackles of cyclic existence. So the difference between ordinary people who are unliberated and sages who are liberated is something we must have confidence in, and we should not hold any doubts whatsoever. So we shouldn't doubt that a sage has this type of wisdom, they have this type of awakening. Now, if we can understand this difference and believe in it and have confidence in it, then we will understand that the enlightened beings do exist. Liberation is possible, and we can develop the confidence in the wisdom and the skills that the sages possess. In addition, we also have to believe in the virtues of the sages. So what this means is, when you read the Buddhist texts, you sometimes will come across the virtues of a Buddha in particular, the 3 knowledges, the 6 supernatural powers, the 10 powers, the 4 kinds of fearlessness, and so forth. If you don't believe in the existence of a sage, this implies you also don't believe in the existence or the attainment of these types of virtues. So when we cultivate this right view about the existence of ordinary people and sages, we effectively will also be cultivating conviction and faith in the existence of these types of virtues. And it's important because often we will admire someone that we would regard as a hero, but for some reason we never think that we can be the same as them. Here, having right view about the existence of sages doesn't mean to just admire them. It means to have confidence that we ourselves can also achieve what they achieve. So, excuse me. So if we can develop this confidence in the existence of sages and their virtues, even if at our present time we're only aiming for the human or the heavenly vehicle, this does not mean, this means that we still have planted the seed for the transcendental path. Because when we have faith in their existence, it means that we've planted in our consciousness the possibility that we can become just like them. So at present, you may think, oh, I can't attain that level. I'll just aim for a human birth, and hopefully I'll be born with a silver spoon in my mouth or something like that. But subconsciously, believing in the existence of the sages means that we can gradually nurture the seeds for liberation in future. But in contrast, if we don't believe in the sages and their virtues, we may end up slandering the truth, and instead we nurture the seeds from our incorrect practices and views. And this can actually create obstacles to our spiritual progression. So some people, for some reason, they may think that they themselves are quite smart, but they end up using their common view of ordinary people to judge everything. And they would then think, well, they are not a sage. They have no wisdom. They don't have any supernatural powers. However, even recognizing that, they somehow think that everyone else is the same as them. And so there can't be any sages. And you may question, who would think like that? But as you get out there and meet with more and more people and you talk about these type of spiritual experiences, you'll find that there are some people who do question the existence of the saints, the gods, and so forth. But a very good analogy is to think about pottery. You know, we can use clay to make a pot, but if the pot is not fired properly in a kiln, when it encounters water, that clay pot will eventually dissolve and break down. Or if it's exposed to the elements, it will dry and crack. But in contrast, if that pottery piece is fired properly in a kiln and becomes porcelain or ceramic, then it can withstand water and exposure to the elements. So the raw materials in our world can be greatly improved by refining processes. Similarly, we as human beings can also be greatly improved through the practice of the Dharma and being refined by the fire of prajna. So we must develop firm confidence and deep understanding of the Buddha Dharma and rely on this conviction to firmly establish our right view that there are ordinary people and sages. So what we have covered are the core aspects of right view that a Buddhist practitioner should equip themselves with. Now we move on to the next part, which is about the 5 realms. So this is the beginning of part 1, stage 2. And it begins with a half verse which says, as we cycle within the 5 realms, our bodies and minds endure much suffering. So as sentient beings cycle within the 5 realms, this situation is not ideal because in terms of our bodies and minds, we endure all sorts of suffering. Nonetheless, when we move from great suffering to lesser suffering, we actually think of it as being more relaxing and comfortable. And the human realm already has many trials and tribulations. Needless to say, the suffering experienced in the 3 evil realms is much worse. Now, even in the different levels of heavens, where beings enjoy all types of bliss, they still have certain types of vexations, especially when their heavenly lifespan is coming to an end and they begin to see the destination of their next life, especially if it's one of regression to the lower realms. So you can kind of imagine the mental torture of knowing you're up in heaven and you've enjoyed eons of bliss, and next you're going to regress into the lower realms of the animals or the hungry ghost or even the hell. Excuse me. But as human beings, we really only know about our realm through our experiences. Most of us have already forgotten about our past lives in other realms. And in particular, for us, I believe that all of us attending this retreat has a fairly good life compared to other people. So at times when everything is going well, it's actually not that easy to develop the interest and or the diligence to practice the Dharma. So even for a Buddhist, there are times when we're very energetic and diligent, and there are times when we do slack off. So as part of establishing right view, we need to learn about the 5 realms and the suffering of each realm to develop our understanding and conviction about cyclic existence and liberation. So in terms of the 5 realms, Venerable Yin-Shun first introduces the hell realm in the following verse. So the 8 great hells have extreme heat. All the adjacent hells must be traversed. The 8 cold hells and solitary hell. Here all beings endure suffering, a most painful place. Now, sometimes when we think about it, it's quite interesting that in all religions and cultural beliefs in this world, there is this concept of a heaven and hell. Now, everyone would like to avoid hell, of course, but in the Chinese culture, when you think about it a bit more, hell is a realm of justice, in the sense because once one dies, people think, or the Chinese culture would say that when one dies, one has to appear in hell before the king Yama, or the king of hell, for judgment. And this judgment covers everything that one has done in their lifetime. And then if they've done good, they then move on to their next life, which is a good place. And if they've done bad, then they'll be sentenced to, whichever hell for how long to suffer and so forth. So in one sense, it's a realm of justice, but it's also a realm that everybody seems to fear. But in the Buddhist context, hell is not a place that everyone automatically goes to after death. Only those who have committed bad deeds are reborn there due to their negative karmic forces. Now, the word hell in Sanskrit is naraka, and it means a place of torment. So the first and the main type is the 8 great hells. Now, due to the raging flames that burn in these hells, the beings here are tormented by extreme heat. And for this reason, they are sometimes also referred to as the 8 hot hells. Now, according to the scriptures, the location of these 8 great hells, or these 8 hot hells, is below where we are. So it's at the center of the earth and is, in fact, extremely hot. So, for example, when we think about it, when a volcano erupts and the lava is spewed out, that is extremely hot, and that comes from the center of the earth. Now, both the Buddhist scriptures and Christianity's Old Testament also have records of the earth splitting open and people falling directly into hell. Now, some people will question, with the kind of heat at the earth's core, how can any life form survive there? Now, someone who questions in this manner it's logical in a sense because they're thinking from their human point of view. But again, this reflects what I mentioned before. The different beings in different realms have their own karma, and we need to understand that the power of karma is unfathomable. There are some beings who drown in water, while some beings can only survive in water. Some beings die if they're buried in the ground, while others spend their whole life in the ground. So the beings in hell, because of their karma, they can survive in that type of extreme heat, even though they are tormented by that heat at the same time. So here is a listing of the 8 great hells, or the 8 hot hells. The names are provided in Sanskrit. Now, these 8 great hells or hot hells have 2 defining characteristics. Now, one is that all the residents, all the beings in these hells endure the burning or the scorching of the flames and the pain inflicted by burning hot metal objects. So not only are these 8 hot hells constantly burning, there are various metal objects that exist in these different hells that also inflict pain and suffering on the beings there. Now, everything in these hells supposedly are made of metal, including the ground, the rooms, the troughs, the mountains, the ropes, the knives, plates, etc., etc. Everything there is made of metal, and that metal is also burning hot. So the beings here endure a lot of suffering from all types of scorching flames and burning hot metal objects. That's the first characteristic. The other characteristic is that the beings here have very large bodies and very long lifespans. So, for instance, beings in the lowest, the 8th hell, the Avisi hell, have a lifespan of 1 medium eon. So, therefore, the greatest torment in these hells is not that one cannot survive. So in us humans, we're always thinking of ways to survive. But for the beings in these hell, the greatest torment is that death does not come soon enough. Now, for these beings, until their karmic force is completely exhausted, no matter how they try, they will never die completely. So there's no such thing as suicide in hell. Even when their torment and their torture causes them to be reduced to ashes, they will come alive again. And at the deepest core, which is the Avisi hell, this hell is constantly burning, and the beings here endure pain and suffering without any respite at all. And the people who are reborn in the Avisi hell are those who have committed the extreme faults, or the 5 grave faults. Now, the second type of hell is the adjacent hells. So these are located next to the 8 great hells. And the description is that each of the 8 great hells has 4 gates. And when you pass through one of these gates, there are 4 similar adjacent hells. So what this means is that around one great hell, there are 16 adjacent hells. So in total, for the 8 great hells, there are 128 adjacent hells. And for beings, once their lifespan in the great hell is over, they pass through one of these gates and they have to traverse all 4 adjacent hells. So they move from one to the next and endure the different types of torment in the adjacent hells. And for this reason, the adjacent hells are sometimes also referred to as itinerant hells. So the table here provides information about the 4 great hells, the 4 adjacent hells, and what people experience there. Now, due to time, I'm not going to go into that in detail. These slides I will fix up and have available as handouts if you want to refer to it after the talk. Now, the third type of hell is the cold hells. So opposite to the 8 great hells or the 8 hot hells, we now have the 8 cold hells. Now, these are said to be located external to the Earth if one travels horizontally from the Earth's core. Now, some people say that the 8 cold hells are located at the Iron Mountain range. So if you have an understanding of the Buddhist cosmology, in the center of each world system, there is Mount Sumeru, and at the periphery, which creates the border or the perimeter, the furthest point of that world system, you have what's called the Iron Mountain range. And this mountain range marks the boundary of one world system. And it is said that at this point, the sun and the moon's rays do not even reach the mountain range. So it is an extremely, extremely cold place. Now, some interpret the cold hells to be located in the north and south poles of the Earth, because from their understanding, that is the coldest location they can think of. So the names of the 8 cold hells are also presented here. Here it's quite interesting because the names of these hells reflect the result of being tormented here. So you've got the names blister, burning blister. So it's reflective of having endured that extreme cold, what appears on their body. So number 3, 4, and 5, these reflect the type of noise people make, or the beings, not people, the hell beings make when they experience that type of cold. And number 6, 7, and 8, even though the name sounds fairly nice, a blue lotus, a red lotus, a great red lotus, this is actually reflective of the wounds that these hell beings start to develop because of the extreme cold. Now, in the great treatise on the stages of the path to enlightenment by the Tibetan master Tsongkhapa, they actually describe what it's like in these 8 cold hells. And here it says, an incomparable wind pierces your bones. Your body shakes and freezes. You bend over and shrivel. Hundreds of blisters rise and pop. Creatures born from them eat and claw you. Fat, lymph, and marrow ooze out. Exhausted, teeth clenched, all hair standing on end. You are tormented by wounds in your eyes, ears, and gullet. Mind and body stupefied by pain. You dwell in the cold hell and emit a pitiful wail. So that's just a very graphic description of what the beings in these cold hells endure. Now, the 4th type of hell is the solitary hells. Now, these hells are said to be located in various places, including our own human realms, in the mountains, on islands, in the wilderness, forest. Basically, this type of hell can be found everywhere. Now, solitary hell is not a place where many beings gather together. As the name suggests, only a few, maybe 1 or 2 beings, will exist in each one of these solitary hells. Now, if we think about this type of hell, it does exist on Earth, because there have been reported cases of people being held and imprisoned illegally and abused for many years in that solitary state. So in all the different hells, the beings endure suffering. The hell realm is a most painful place to be born in. But prior to attaining liberation from cyclic existence, each one of us faces the possibility of falling into the hell realm. So we should be very fearful and avoid committing unwholesome deeds. And instead, we should carry out as many wholesome deeds as we can if we want to avoid falling into any one of these hell realms. So next, the discussion moves on to beings being born in the animal realm. And here we have a half verse. Creatures manifest all sorts of different characteristics. The main suffering is eating each other and enslavement. So creatures, also called animals, in essence, this includes all living beings on Earth apart from human beings. Now, in modern times, we commonly collectively refer to this as the animal realm. But the bodily appearance, the color, the habitat, lifestyle, and lifespan of different animals have very different characteristics. In the Buddha Dharma, one general way of classifying animals is by the number of legs they have. For example, worms and snakes are classified into the category of having no legs. Humans, birds, etc. are in the category of 2 legs. Then you've got dogs, cats, and large beasts. Sometimes they're classified into the category of having 4 legs. And then you have the category of multiple legs, which include insects and bugs and so forth. Another way of classifying animals is via their habitat. And over time, as we know with evolution, animals evolve and they can migrate to different places in terms of their habitat. So the obvious split is by water, air, and land. But then you also have the categorization where a certain type of animal can live in 2 habitats or more. So some animals can live on land and in water, while some live in water, land, and they can fly in the air and so forth. So the animal realm, with all its differences, can be categorized using different ways. Now, even though there are great differences in the different types of animals, we need to also understand that there's differences in terms of their intellect and lifespan and the type of joy and suffering they experience. So some animals are much smarter, some are not so smart, some have very long lifespans, and some very short. Some animals enjoy much happiness, especially when you think about a lot of the pampered pets we see nowadays. But on the whole, all the beings in the animal realm tend to suffer more because pampered pets are a minority. So when we talk about the animal realm in Buddhism, this also includes some of the what you would think of as the more fictional types of animals. And in the Buddhist context, we need to understand that there are animals that we don't see, such as the dragons and the phoenix and so forth. So the sutras teach us that animals, such as birds, have a greater scope of cognition, and so their color varies. So when you read the sutras, there are explanations as to why there are all these differences in the animal realm, and it's due to their ability to cognize and so forth. So regardless of which type of animal, the main suffering in the animal realm is the mutual killing and eating of each other. Now, we can easily observe how big fish eat smaller fish, or large insects eat smaller ones, and so forth. And we need to understand that all animals are subject to being prey. So in the animal realm, there's this constant fear of being killed and eaten. But apart from this mutual killing, animals are also subject to torture and enslavement, particularly by humans. So the type of suffering that animals in the animal realm endure mainly comes from two aspects. One is from their own system of survival, which is survival of the fittest and eating each other. And the other type is by enslavement by more powerful animals, particularly enslavement and torment by humans, and so forth. So next we have the hungry ghost realm, and here the half verse says, hungry ghosts are constantly starving. They consume only putrid things. Now, in the Chinese culture, we also say that people become ghosts after they die. But this notion of a ghost is not the same as the concept or the teaching concerning hungry ghost realm. So in the Buddha Dharma, we will learn that there are three main groups of hungry ghosts. So there are the destitute hungry ghosts, and when we within these three groups, the first is the destitute, and there are three types. So one is called the torch mouth, and here any food and drink that they are able to get, once they put it in their mouths, it turns to ashes. The next one is the needle mouth, and this is where their throats are as thin as a needle, and so they're effectively unable to swallow any food and drink they can get hold of. And then there is the stinky mouth, and this is where their mouths are rotten and smelly and stinky. So this causes them to be unable to eat and drink. So this is the first group, which is the destitute group. And this is, of course, the group that basically find it extremely hard to eat anything at all. Next, we have the group that's called the poor group. And again, there are three subgroups in here, and the names are needle hair, stinky hair, and goiter. And these reflect their physical qualities, again, what they look like in appearance. Now, for these beings, when they eat and drink, the food turns into putrid things. So they can still eat it, but it's extremely putrid and not very nice. So when we talk about putrid things, it means it can turn into blood and pus or phlegm, saliva, etc., etc. And this is kind of like the main group of hungry ghosts. And that's why in this second group, their consumption of putrid things is used as a general characteristic to define the hungry ghost realm. Now, within the hungry ghosts, there is this third group, which is the wealthy group. Now, the beings in this particular group sometimes enjoy a bit of fortune. So one is the cast-off group, and they mainly survive and live off offerings from humans. And these beings are similar to the spirits and gods referred to in the Chinese culture. The next group is the lost items group, and they live and survive off lost items forgotten by humans. So the third group is what we call the powerful group. And the beings here consist of beings like the yaksas and the rakshas and other powerful ghost kings. So these beings are a small group, are a minority group, and they actually enjoy fortune very similar to the lower levels of heavens. So although this third group exists, predominantly the beings in the hungry ghost realms fall within the destitute and the poor group. And so they endure a lot of starvation and poverty. And so for this reason, this realm in total is referred to as the hungry ghost realm. Now, the evil realms are due to 3 unwholesome roots. They are the result of committing evil deeds. So the 3 unwholesome realms of the hell, the animal, and the hungry ghost realms, being born in any one of these is a result of defilements originating from the 3 unwholesome roots. Now, within the desire realm, all beings have greed, hatred, and ignorance. Now, these 3 defilements are the origins of unwholesome deeds. And when these defilements are active and taken to the extreme, they can cause us humans to commit all sorts of unwholesome deeds, which create the causes for being born in any one of these 3 evil realms or lower realms. So it's very important for us that we bear in mind this aspect and try not to let our defilements get the better of us. So next we move to the human realm. And human life has a mix of suffering and bliss. It is the fulcrum of progression or regression. Grounded in the human form, but misunderstood as ghost-based, ingrained misunderstanding becomes the accepted belief. So being born as a human, the experience is unlike the suffering in the 3 evil realms. Neither is it like the bliss in the heavenly realm. So human life has a mix of suffering and bliss, not as extreme as in the 3 evil realms or the heavens, but a good balance. So we all know that at times life can be quite painful, but at other times life can be quite smooth and we enjoy happiness. And this mix of suffering and bliss is actually an ideal environment when it comes to the study and practice of the Buddha Dharma. In the 3 evil realms, there's just too much suffering, and the beings here have no relief time, no spare time to even think about the Buddha Dharma, let alone sit down and read the sutras and practice it. But in contrast, in the heaven, there's too much bliss, and the beings here are so absorbed in their own leisure and indulgence, this actually dampens their wisdom, which is contrary to the Buddha Dharma. Because in the Buddha Dharma, wisdom is a crucial aspect of cultivation. Life in the human realm is a bit like using a whetstone to sharpen a knife. The more you grind, the sharper the blade becomes. But life in the heavenly realm is like using a knife to cut through soil. The more you cut, the more blunt that knife becomes. So we need to recognize that this human realm does have something superior when it comes to our practice. Within the 5 realms, the human realm is the fulcrum that determines whether we progress or regress. Now, what this means is that the actions we carry out as a human determines our progression to the higher levels or our regression to the lower levels. In the heavens, heavenly beings, because of their situation, their environment, the defilements they have are actually very weak, so they can't commit. It doesn't cause them to commit serious evil karma that can bring them to the hells. Conversely, as I mentioned, the beings in the hell realms are in continuous suffering, so they actually have no time to create more evil karma. Now, the hungry ghosts and the animal realms, these beings just behave out of pure instinct. So they don't intentionally create evil. So animals, when they kill each other, it's purely for food and survival. It's unlike human beings when they plan to kill someone to take their life. There's intention to kill and end one's life for one's own ulterior motives and so forth. So basically in the other realms, the conditions that the beings face make it virtually impossible or very unlikely that they can commit really evil deeds and so forth. And that's why it's this human realm that is the fulcrum. So what we do as a human creates the karma for our future rebirths. So karmic forces determine where we are reborn. And among the 5 realms, only humans are capable of intentionally creating the evilest of evil and the greatest of good. And for this reason, only humans can consciously make the decision to renounce and become a monastic, a spiritual practitioner. Only humans can make the conscious decision to uphold the precepts, to cultivate spiritual practices, and to aspire to end cyclic existence and attain Buddhahood. So we need to actually recognize that being human is very valuable in terms of our spiritual progression and practice. So last is the heavenly realm, and this is another wholesome and fortunate destination. And in terms of the bliss that is experienced, it is the most blissful and sublime place one can choose to be if that's what you want to experience. And the verse says, heavenly realm begins with the desire realm heavens. Then there are the form and formless realm heavens. Bodily form and lifespan are most superior. So too, their enjoyment of meditation and concentration. So here, this summarizes the heavenly realm. Now, given time, I'll just quickly, because here it mentions the desire realm, the form, and the formless realm. So within the Buddhist cosmology, there are 3 major realms. And the first is the desire realm. Then we have the form realm and the formless realms. And within these 3 realms, there are various levels of heavens as well. So due to time, we've only got 2 minutes left. I'll probably end here because there's a lot of details to go through in terms of the heavenly realm. So we'll cover that tomorrow and we'll wrap up as much as we can of part 1, stage 2 tomorrow as well. And anything else we miss out on will be to be continued for next year. Okay, so that will bring us to the end of today's discussion. I hand it back to you, Larry.
We still have a couple of minutes, but maybe a
Do
quick
we have
question.
a minutes? Yeah. Any questions?
Quick questions.
I have questions, Venerable. I'll
Yes.
try. Thank you. I'll make them short. But so regarding the Hungry Ghost realm,
Yes.
so I had heard that it's not proper to make incense offerings in the evenings because it would attract hungry ghosts. Are you familiar with that?
I am familiar with that. Um, are you talking about when you make incense offerings to the Buddha in the evening for evening chanting and so forth?
Yes.
Yeah, so there is a difference, okay? When we talk about making offerings, you need to specifically say this is for so and so, because they have, in a sense, they also have their rules. Now, when we do our morning and evening chanting and we burn and offer incense, that incense is specifically offered to the Buddhas and the Bodhisattvas. So they, in short, they won't be able to get to it. And even if they're attracted to, if you're worried about attracting them to your home and so forth, you need not fear, because with your practice of the Dharma and when you make the offerings to the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, there is the blessings from the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas there. In the Chinese culture, when we're making offerings to our ancestors and so forth, this can happen because usually the offerings are made in the evening. And that's the time when the ghost realm, the hungry ghost realm, is most active. So there's partial truth to what you heard. So when we specifically want to make offerings to the ghost realm in the Chinese culture, we always do it in the evening because that's their active time. But if you're making incense offering to the Buddhas as part of your evening chanting service and so forth, that is not intended for them. So they will not actually come into your home and, you know, try and steal a piece of that incense, so to speak. Does
Thank you.
that help?
It does, thank you. And it wasn't from a standpoint of me being concerned they would, invade,
Yeah.
but I thought since they are in such a bad state anyways, why would it matter?
Yeah, so what you can do, okay, is when you do your evening chanting and you have compassion for these beings, you dedicate your merits to them and hope that the merits can help them gain temporary relief by finding food and be able to actually have that food. But you also dedicate the merit to them finding permanent relief, which is to be able to end their lifetime or that particular life in the hungry ghost realm and be born in a place where they can meet with the triple gem.
Okay.
So from that aspect, you can also help them through dedication of your merits through your practice. Yes.
Thank you. Just one other brief thing. Earlier, when you were talking about when people die going before Yama to be judged.
That's the Chinese culture. Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
I was going to ask for clarification. Okay.
Yeah, yeah. In the Chinese culture, apparently, when a person is born, it begins to record everything you do in the minus detail, in the most minute detail. And then once you die, you go before King Yama or the King of Hell, and they will go through that book, which is your personal diary, so to speak, or record, and then they will make a judgment there. So everyone, according to the Chinese belief, everyone becomes a ghost and then they have to go to hell, and then in hell they're judged. And then through that judgment, they either then, get sentenced to actual torture in hell, or they are then taken to what's referred to as the well of rebirth. So they enter that well and they're reborn in the heaven or as a human and so forth, depending on, what that judgment comes out to be. Yeah.
Okay.
But that's the Chinese culture. That's the Chinese
Uh,
cultural belief.
I was wondering, so speaking of details, do you know of anything in English that goes into detail about the content that you're presenting?
Uh, well, I have to say, I've skipped a lot of the content I had prepared because of the time. So in Venerable Yin-Shun's book, there is a lot of detail in there. Um, my translation of this book is still work in progress. And I mean, I've only got chapter 4 left. I've finished chapters 1, 2, 3, and 5. So I've still got to translate chapter 4. But if you want to read about it, you can maybe have a first look at the existing English version of The Way to Buddhahood that is available. I think it's by Wisdom Publications. It was
It
translated
is.
by, yeah, so there are more details in there. I've even though I've prepared for it, I've skipped a lot of it because of the time constraints. But yeah, in terms of the actual details about the heavens and the hells and all that, if you really want to learn the specifics, another suggestion is the Abhidharma text.
Yes.
Yeah. There is an Abhidharma text, and I think there is an English version available, and that is in a lot of detail. So it'll tell you each hell and the lifespan, how to calculate the lifespan and so forth in the hells and the heavens and all that. There's like a whole chapter on each different realm,
Thank
but
you.
it's really dry. It's
Well, I was doing Venerable Bodhi was teaching annually on the Abhidhamma
yeah,
for a retreat, so I did take all of those, but had forgotten that went through that. But thank you, I appreciate it.
yeah. Yeah, well, if I can think of anything else, I'll fill you in tomorrow. I'll have a look around and I'll fill you in tomorrow for you and anyone else who wants to know the actual nitty-gritty of each realm.
Much.
Okay. Any
All
other
right.
questions?
I think it's time.
Okay.
All right.
Yeah.
Three bows to the Buddha. First bow. Second bow. And third bow. And bow to your teacher. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
You.